Hi everyone, welcome to RPA Explorers channel.
Hope you all are doing good. In today's video, we are going to see how you can send email with HTML or an email which contains a table in it. Let's see how you can build it. And now let's run the bot we built already and then check the email. The execution is completed. Let's look at the email now. This is the email which has a specific body along with the table and the salutation. Let's understand the use case before we start building it. We have a sample Excel which has 3 different columns, and basically bot will count the number of channel name which has more than X subscriber. So you have to provide the value to the X and it will give us a total count. Let's look at the body of the email, and in the body we have a table with 2 columns and 1 row, and here it will replace as the total count of the channel names. And also in the body we are attaching the count along with the input file path. Now let's see how you can build this. So let's create a new activity, and we have built the complete process using an email connector and a C# connector. Now let's start building it on our own. And the very first step is to add a connectors. Let's add the C# connector and email connector. And we need 2 C# connector. One is for finding the count and the second is for replacing the body with its value. Let's add one more connector. We have added the connector and renamed it. So let's start building it. The very first step is to read the Excel, and we have 2 options to read the Excel. Either you can go with Excel connector or you can go to the toolbox and filter with Excel. So let's use read from Excel component. Let's provide the path now. And the sheet name is sheet 1. The third parameter which is first row header, which is of type boolean. So here our first row which is header, so let's make it to true and go to static. You can choose a true. And now let's just execute this. So this is completed. You can also preview the count and the data table. So the count is 7. So we have 7 rows in the Excel as well. You can also preview the data table. So this is working now. Now the next step is to find the total number of channel counts. Let's configure the C# connector. You have to right click on this, configure. This is the editor window which has 2 tabs, script and the references. So here you have to add references whichever you use it in the code. So you have a sample structure or a code which you have to follow to write your code. So we have to provide our references and our classes, and we have to return our value. First let's remove this and start writing our code. So let's get started with the references, and now I'm going to add all the necessary references. We are going to count it based on the link query. So we'll just add link. I'm going to declare my public class, which is class, let's say it as count. You have to define all your input parameter, and we are going to declare our method. So let's call it as find channel count. And now let's start declaring the parameter. So we are going to have a data table which comes from the Excel. Let's call it as input dt Excel data table. And we are going to get the column name, which is also an input parameter. Let's call it as column name. And the third, which is nothing but our threshold value, which is our X value. So let's call it as X. And now we'll declare the output parameter, which is nothing but output count. And now let's start writing the link query. we are done with the code, and we have a class called count method which is find success count. We have three input parameters or data table, column name and the threshold value which is x, getting the channels count with the help of link query. So we are just applying the link query on the given column which is subscriber and converting each integer column to a string, and then we are comparing it. So once the count is done, we are returning the count. So let's click on validate. Contains error, all the errors which are related to the references. So to add, make sure, and you have to add all the references you used in the script. So first the basic, so let's add the common one which is system.data. So let's click on, let's type in data, and you can use the latest version. Okay, let's click on validate. We have an error which says that we must add a reference to an assembly which is system.xml, and also they have given the version. Whenever you get an error, you read the complete error and there is a clue, or you can get the direct thing what exactly you have to do. So now I'm just going to add it, which is system.xml. Let's click on validate now. And we have one more error which is the data table does not contain the definition for as enumerable. So we are using a function which is as enumerable here, which belongs to the reference called data set definition. So let's add that now. And in the error we don't have the reference name, but we have to add it. But usually when you use as enumerable, make sure you add the data set extension as well. Data set extension. So I'm going to use the latest. Let's click on validate now, and again you have a different error which says that does not contain a count or no extension method system.data.data row. So after I add the default namespace, the code block is compiled successfully and we don't have an error. Let's click on OK now. The next step is to execute the code. Double click on it to get its method, which is execute. Connector has only one method which is execute, so you have to configure it in the global objects itself. So by default you won't get the classes and methods over here. Just click on this, and here you have to choose the classes, which is count in our case, and you have methods, and also you have some default methods like string, you can get the hash code and so on. Let's choose find success count. Click on OK. As soon as you select your method and class, you will be seeing all the respective input parameters and the output ones. So first parameter, which is XLDT, which should be the data table, so I'm going to pass this. The next one, which is the column name, which is nothing but subscriber. It will get the count of channel which has more than 100 subscribers. So we have 1, 2 and 3. So the output should be 3. Let's give the threshold value as 100. And now let's run this. So this is completed. We'll preview the data now. As you see, got the expected output which is 3. So you can also change it. So let me make it as 50. So we have 6. Okay, except one channel, all other channel has more than 50 subscribers. So the count is 6, which is expected. And now the next step is to configure the body of the email. So and now let's take the other C# connector and configure it. So I'm going to remove all this. So remove everything, and I'm going to keep the default one. And let's start writing the code. So now I'll quickly copy the class and methods. Okay. So I have a class which is called getHTML body, and the method which is getBody, and here we have 3 input parameter, which is the input a string, which is nothing but your actual body, and the count which we get from the previous connector, and the next which is the input file path. We are trying to include file path in the body of the email itself. So now let's start writing the actual code. If you remember, we have included the time in the email as well. So first let's start by calculating the time of it, which will create a variable of type date time. So I'll call it as current time. So I'm going to declare the output email body. So, and also make sure that you don't have any typo in the data type, because if you notice that capital S is not accepted, you have to give it to small, which is the actual data type. The next thing is, so we are going to apply the replace method on the input string. So and then we have to replace the, is nothing but the channel count. So I'll call it as count. Okay, and this is the input string which has the HTML table content. So it has all the syntax and everything. We are just going to replace the value of the count, and also it include the salutation of the body. In case you want to change it, you can do it in the input string itself. The input string, we are trying to replace it, replace the count from this input counter. So this is the first replacement, and the next replacement is to replace the actual body of the email. We have to replace this body. Let's have one more replace method. We are going to replace the body, and here you can provide your actual body. So in here either you can have the constant body, or you can also pass that as a separate input string. So now let's see that. Please find the total So in the actual emails, let's also include the threshold value. So we add one more parameter which is string. Let's call it as threshold. Okay, please find. And also I'm going to include my file path in the curly braces. So let's add it now. Plus then our curly braces. Then the next is in input path. And at the end we are going to include the timing, which is nothing but our current time. So we have month, date, year and our timing. And at the end we also have to provide a full stop. So we are done with the replacement, and the final step is to return the output email body. First we are replacing the count in the input string, and then the body of the email along with the input file path and the timing. Let's click on validate now. So okay, we have certain error which is nothing but including our namespaces. So include all the one we have used here. Okay, I have system. So the data one. Okay, here I think it's not necessary to convert it as it is already a string. The code is compiled successfully now. Let's click on OK. Let's execute this method. C# replace body, and we'll select the class and method names. So our input string is nothing but this one. I'm going to pass this. The next is the count, which we get from the channel count. The next, which is file path, I'm going to provide it. You can also create a separate variable for the file path, which you can use it here. And the next, which is threshold, it should be same as here. And even for this you have to create a separate variable, okay, so that you can easily change it in the variable itself. And let me run this. Okay, this is completed. Let's look at the output. Let's try to send this email and see the complete output, for which we are going to use the email connector. So we have to add the email connector, which I have added already. So, and double click on it to get all the methods. And now take the send mail method. In order to use any other email connector method, the first is to use the set config method, as we use open method for Excel connector before using any other method. Similarly, you have to choose the set config. So now let's provide the username and password. And also I'm using an Outlook to send email, not Gmail. The third parameter, which is use default credentials, if you make it to true, it will use the default account from your system. The next parameter, which is SMTP mail server. So now we'll get the server address of SMTP for Outlook. Google it for SMTP for Outlook and you get IMAP SMTP server and port address. So let's copy the first one. The next parameter, which is IMAP server, so let's replace it. For every server you have two kinds of connection, SSL or TLS. So I'm not going to change it, let it true. And the next point, which is SMTP port and the IMAP port. Let's copy the IMAP port, which is 993, and this is already same. The next parameter, which is SMTP port 587, so this is also already same. So, and we are done with the set config. The next is method, which is end email. So you have to provide your to address. You can also provide your CC and BCC. The next is subject. Let's call it as demo for YouTube on HTML body on HTML. And the next is the body, which we get from C# connector. And the next important parameter is HTML body. So if you are sending any HTML body, make sure you change it to true. If you're not replacing it to true, you'll get the HTML content as a part of body in the email. Next is attachment. In case you have any attachment, you have to provide the path over here. So we are done with the development. We'll connect everything. We'll run the process now. Execution is completed. Let's wait for the email to be received. I have received the email now. Let's open it. After we completely execute the process, I have received an email something like this. So which is like we have the body is of the input file path. What we received is the actual body of the email. So I troubleshooted it and there was a simple mistake in the code that instead of replacing the input file path, I replaced the actual input string. So after replacing the count variable, we got the input string in place. That's why we have this output. Like if you see, after replacing the count value, we had the body of the email in place of the actual email path. So I just made the changes. I changed the input string to this input file path. Before I noticed there was an issue in the input file path, I thought it was something issue in the count variable. If you remember, we have that count in the HTML bodies, HTML content itself. So, but this change isn't necessary until you have something unique to be replaced. As I have more count, I made it to total count, but the actual error was with the parameter we are passing. So after I change it, I got the expected output. Let's click on validate. And also I haven't made any other changes except changing the parameter name, which is file path, and changing the total count over here. So let's click on OK. And this is same as the previous one. As I made a copy and pasted, it was like a string, not in the HTML content. It's actually the same thing. So let me run again and check the output. So I have received the email. So you can see that we have the email in the expected format. It has replaced the threshold value, which is 50, and the file path and also the current timing. Along with it, we do have the table. So you can send email with an HTML body or table content using a C# connector. Sorry for the confusion, guys. It was mistake while adding the input parameter. You can also try this use case. In case you have any doubts or any error, please let me know in the comment section. And in the coming videos, we are going to see more connectors like PDF, email, Outlook, data table, list, and so on. In case you guys find this video useful, make sure you like, subscribe to my channel as well. And thank you so much for watching this video.